let's dive into talking about the birthing through hypnosis techniques for stage 2 of labor. And first, I want to start talking about stage 2. This is the birthing phase, right? We've just finished talking about stage 1, and that is the phase where our uterus opens, the cervix opens to be able to let the baby out. Stage 2 is the baby going through that opening into the birth canal, all the way through the birth canal, and being born and placed onto your chest. So stage 2, everything changes, right? Everything that the muscles are doing in the uterus change. And so what we need to be doing in terms of techniques needs to change as a result of that. So in stage 1, remember that we've got these horizontal muscle fibers, almost like ribbons, and the vertical muscle fibers are coming and pulling up on them and pulling them up and out of the way. That is the way that the cervix opens, right? It gets all those muscles that have been holding that baby in tight and closed for so many months. Now they're out of the way and the birth canal is wide open. So these vertical muscles, now that they've gotten the horizontal muscles out of the way, they change what they're doing. And instead of pulling up like fingers, they start shortening from the top. So literally they are shortening from the top, shortening from the top, shortening from the top with every contraction, making the uterus smaller and smaller and smaller. And in 6 weeks, your uterus is back to the size it was before you got pregnant. Well, that's in the long run. In the short run, what's happening is your body is literally pushing your baby into the birth canal and pushing your baby into your arms. So what we're going to do as a result of that changes. So the balloon breath no longer applies, right? That is the perfect breath to do when your body is working in the opening phase. But in the pushing phase, we're going to talk about the top down breath. And we'll get into the details of the top down breath and the details of position. But I want to talk about the urge to push, and to illustrate all of the details of the urge to push, I'm going to talk about my first son's birth. But the reason I want to talk about it is that, to me, urge to push, they are just the wrong words, right? Before my first son was born, I thought the urge to push was like the urge I have just about every night around this time to eat ice cream. And if I go with that urge, because what the urge means is that I really, really want to, if I go with it, then I eat ice cream. And if I fight the urge, I don't. But I thought the urge to push was I was just going to really, really want to push. So with my first baby, I went into labor at 2:00 in the afternoon. I started feeling contractions just after a nap, which is a lovely thing to do late in labor. Make sure you're rested. And I labored during the course of the first stage on my hands and knees, on my side, on a birth ball. I moved rooms in my house. I spent time in the bathtub. Really being in different positions was incredibly helpful to me, and doing some of the balloon breath for sure, and also some of the visualization techniques that we'll talk about later. When I was on my side in the bathtub, my midwife checked me at one point and said I was fully dilated. Woohoo! I was so excited. And she said, if you want to push, push. If I want to, of course I want to. So I started pushing, and I could immediately tell that there was absolutely nothing happening. Like, it felt like nothing. So at that moment, I asked my husband, what time is it? And I do not recommend you do this. I'll talk about it again later, but asking what time it is makes your logical brain come online. Your analytical brain does not know how to give birth. It makes you do math. It's not helpful. But the reason I asked was that I went into labor at 2 p.m. the day before my stepdaughter's birthday, and she had been very clear she did not want to share her birthday. So I wanted to know, how much time do I have, right? And I expected him to say it was about 6 p.m. and that I had plenty of time. But no, it was 10 p.m. And so I decided to get out of the tub. I wanted to get into a vertical position so that I could let gravity help me get this baby out. So talking about position, gravity is a great thing to think about when you're in the pushing phase, right? So let's take a moment to talk about positions. On the sitcoms, what we've seen women usually get into, right? A semi-reclined position. They're propped up with pillows. They've somehow magically got their knees behind their ears. And somebody is holding their legs, or they're in stirrups, and somebody's coaching them 10, 9, 8, and they're holding their breath and right, pushing as hard as they can with their eyes bulging out. And I think of this as purple pushing. So that's what we're used to seeing on TV. And the reason that is so often portrayed is because it's actually how a lot of mamas are asked to birth their babies. And the reason for this is because most moms, 85%, are medicated. They have an epidural. And what that means is they cannot feel their legs, and nobody is going to let them walk around. So the idea of a walking epidural, as far as I know, is an urban legend. It is a myth, because in this day of liability, nobody is going to let a mama walk around who can't feel her legs. So what an epidural means is that you're confined to your bed. Mostly you're on your back. And you've got an IV, you've got a catheter, you've got the fetal monitor, right? It is a commitment to being in that position. Well, lying on your back is less than an ideal position for many reasons. One is because what you want in terms of position is to have an unencumbered pelvis. Unencumbered pelvis means there is no pressure on all of the bones of your pelvis. Your pelvis is many bones held together with ligaments. And when you're pregnant, your body releases relaxin. Relaxin relaxes your ligaments and makes them so that they can stretch. Have you felt how loosey-goosey your body feels when you're pregnant? It's like things can get thrown out of alignment really easily. Well, that is to your benefit when you're in labor, because as your baby moves through the birth canal, your pelvis can expand. These ligaments can stretch. Your baby's head, the bones of the skull are not fused, so they crisscross over each other. So baby's head gets smaller, your pelvis gets bigger. This is part of what makes this miracle happen. So when a mama is on her back, she does not have an unencumbered pelvis. And in fact, the most movable parts of her pelvis, which are her sacrum and her tailbone, are fixed. They have all your weight on them. So they're the most movable parts that usually move out of the way when your baby's born. And instead, it's almost like mom is having to push over them. It's like she's having to go against gravity, uphill, to get this baby out. So very unideal position, but that is why we see it so often, is that's what's required when a mama is medicated. So yet another reason not to have an epidural. When you're able to feel your legs, you can get into the ideal positions for birthing. So the ideal position is squatting. So when you squat, get this, when you squat, your pelvis is 30% wider than when you're lying on your back. The first time I heard that, I thought it was 13% and my brain exploded. I was so amazed that it was that much bigger. But no, it's 30% wider. That is huge. So think about how much space that is to give birth. So we want that. And some hospitals have beds that fold in a way that you can be supported in a squat. There are squat bars that the hospitals have, some of them. You can lean on your partner and have some assistance. You can put your arm around their neck and be able to squat. But for most of us in the United States, we do not spend a lot of time squatting. It's a very hard position to stay in for a long time, even if you did prenatal yoga. So next best, well, or similar best, it's still 30% wider, is put your hands down, right? Get on your knees. Hands and knees position is an excellent position to give birth in. Like, fabulous, excellent. The only hitch is you have to give yourself permission to get on your hands and knees, which means your butt is going to be in your caregiver's face. And if you can be okay with that, then you're in the best position to give birth. You're stable, you're steady, you can maintain this position for a long time. When a baby is being born and they have shoulder dystocia, meaning they get stuck, like literally stuck in the birth canal, hands and knees position is the position that is chosen for mamas to get into, because babies don't get stuck in that position. It's an absolute miracle. And when you are in the hands and knees position, you can move, right? You're steady and you can move back and forth, front and back. The bones of your pelvis can move because your pelvis is unencumbered. So, and because you can feel, you're not medicalized, you can feel everything that's going on in your body. So you can really assist your baby in moving. Other options are the birth stool and the potty. And the birth stool is basically the position of a potty. You're sitting like you're on the potty, but there's no potty underneath. So we are all familiar with pushing on the potty. That can be an amazing position to be in to go through the second stage. And many moms choose to sit on the potty at the beginning of the second stage because you're going to be pushing anyway. Most likely you're going to evacuate your bowels as your baby is moving through the birth canal, pushing up against the colon. And so laboring on the potty, everything can just feel better. It's going to feel much more comfortable to poop on the potty than to poop anywhere else. And you're going to feel when your baby gets close to your perineum, you're not going to accidentally birth your baby in the potty. So that's a great place to be. So going back to my first son's birth, when I realized, my husband said it was 10 p.m., that I had 2 hours to get this baby out or I would be bumping up against my stepdaughter's birthday, I wanted to use gravity and use these positions that we're talking about now. Lying on your side is fine if you're not in a hurry, if you're comfortable, but lying on your side, meaning that your pelvis is unencumbered, right? Your sacrum and your tailbone can move. But really, it's not as ideal because you're not using gravity. So getting upright is incredibly important. So I decided to get out of the tub, and my midwife said, okay, I'll go set up the birth stool in your bedroom. And I said, no. It just, when I imagined it, it felt awful to me. I wanted to stay in the bathroom. And she looked horrified. And I didn't give it any thought then because I was busy. But later, what I realized is that she wanted to get out of the bathroom. Here we are. There are two midwives. There's my husband, and there is my best friend. And we are all in the smallest room in my house. I am making all kinds of noise that is bouncing off the tile walls. I mean, they were thinking, like, let's get out of here. And yet, without thinking about it, I said no, because I was in a contained, safe space, right? Where do animals give birth, right? Your kitty cat goes and hides under the bed or finds a little corner in the closet. We go find contained, dark, safe spaces. And that's what the bathroom felt like to me. So I love realizing in hindsight that instinct mattered, right? When I imagined being in my bedroom, I felt like I was going to be a tiny little ant in a gigantic gymnasium, totally exposed. And it's not because my bedroom's the size of a gymnasium. It's just bigger than my bathroom. And it didn't feel right. So she brought the birth stool into the bathroom, and we set it up, and I got on there and started pushing and like, right, doing the top down breath, and it felt like nothing was happening. And I pushed for a solid hour, like, I want to have this baby. And really nothing was happening, and my legs were starting to fall asleep. And although I was getting up in between contractions, it was just like, okay, I gotta do something different. Just like when you sit on the potty for too long and your legs fall asleep, like, this isn't working. So we ditched the birth stool and I got on my hands and knees. And my husband was sitting on the edge of the tub. I had my head in his lap. I had my arms around him, so kind of hands and knees in that position, but my hands weren't on the floor. My midwife was next to the tub, one of them. The other midwife was behind me, keeping an eye on my perineum. And my best friend was sitting on the toilet. Like, we were squished in this room. And I immediately, as soon as I got on my hands and knees, felt like a train went through my body. And all of a sudden, there was this incredible, intense, oh, that's what the urge to push is. And boom, light bulb goes off of like, this whole time I had not been feeling the urge to push. I really, really wanted to push. I was trying really, really hard. But even though I was doing this great top-down breath, trying to work with my body, as those vertical muscles start to shorten from the top, I was working with it, but my body wasn't doing that yet. So sometimes with first-time moms, your caregiver can feel, and they feel no lip left of your cervix, but your body hasn't switched yet into these second stage contractions. My body was most likely still doing the first stage contractions, those opening contractions. And for whatever reason, it hadn't realized, or maybe there was still cervix left. Maybe there was something about shifting into that last position that just allowed the baby to move a tiny bit, and boom, my body knew that it was time to push. So whatever the magic combination was, like, aha, this is powerful. So now, rather than my body being doing one thing while I'm trying to push from top down, my body, the strongest muscle in my body, the uterus, is pushing my baby down, and so am I with the top down breath. Now that is powerful. And so from the time I started to feel that urge to push till the time my baby was born was 15 minutes. That is some serious pushing. So going back to being in that experience, the urge to push felt powerful. And here I am holding on to my husband, and I'm feeling the baby going, kind of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back with every breath. And so I could feel that my baby was slowly inching towards the perineum, getting closer and closer. And my midwife said to me, enjoy this. You will never experience this again, because subsequent babies, your body has already done this once. It opens much more easily. The first time, it's like your first baby going back and forth, slowly making their way to the perineum. They are basically paving the way for their siblings. Makes it much easier on their siblings. So that's something to pay attention to if you feel it. I appreciated knowing that this was a once in a lifetime experience. And then I suddenly felt my baby crowning. I knew that there was no more going back and forth. He was just going forward. And in that moment I said, oh no, because my husband wanted to catch the baby and I had my arms around him. So quickly, there was a change of the guards. The midwife came from the back to the front. He went to the back. And all of a sudden, I was holding on to a much smaller person and feeling my baby coming out. And what I want to talk about right now is what people talk about when the baby is coming. I now am being, my attention is coming to this. So the ring of fire is what people talk about when the baby is crowning. And I did not experience anything that felt like a ring of fire. But what that is when the skin of the perineum is stretching to its ultimate capacity to let the baby's head come through, right? So if you want to feel the ring of fire, you can put your fingers in your mouth and pull really hard, and you'll feel that on your lips, right? It's just skin stretching to its ultimate capacity. But let's talk about the perineum for a second, because the perineum is magic. The perineum is made of the same skin that is on a man's penis. And men never worry about the skin of their penis like stretching too far, right? It just, whether it's big, whether it's small, it all works. Well, our skin is exactly the same. It's built to stretch. It's made to give birth and then go back to the way it was before. So this whole time I had a midwife who was keeping an eye on my perineum. So there was a midwife right there. And if it looked like it was getting thin, she would put a thumb on it. She had hot compresses on my perineum, just making sure that that skin was ready to do what it's built to do and stretch. And that's an important point that I'll come back to in a little bit. So in that experience of having my baby come to my perineum, I did not tear, so I didn't feel any of that. My perineum stretched just like it's built to. And I had this experience that I've never heard anybody talk about either before I gave birth or since, which is that as my baby was coming out, I felt the incredible relief of his head being born. And then I felt all of the contours of his body. Like I had a sensory experience of his torso and his hips and his legs and all of it, that it was so profound. And I'm so grateful that I was able to feel that I was not medicalized and unable to feel. And because I was on my hands and knees, I felt it, I didn't see it. And my husband caught my baby. And so in that moment, once I felt the incredible relief of like, poof, I go from being in this, the most intense feeling I've ever had in my life, to it's over, right? That thing is now out, and I need to turn around to see it, and turn around, put my leg over the umbilical cord. Like, what a feat. But I turned around and was shocked to see this absolutely gigantic baby in my husband's hands. I mean, he was roly-poly fat. And if the umbilical cord was not still connected, I would have thought someone did a switch and gave me an older baby. Like, how is it possible that that thing just came out of me? And I remember looking at my midwife and just kind of in shock, and then looking at my best friend with my jaw hanging open. And I know that because she took a picture of me in that moment. She was sitting on the toilet. And then I said, "Can I pick him up?" And she said, "Yeah, it's your baby." And so I reached down and grabbed him and just felt this, well, I felt his balls. So then I knew he was a boy, which I hadn't known until that moment. But I felt him in my arms, the weight of him, and I watched him take his first breath. I watched him open his eyes for the first time, like basically go from being a fish to a human is what it felt like unfold in my arms. And then I just remember kissing my husband and kissing this little being and just being completely, over the moon. What magic our bodies can do, what magic this universe allows us to do as women. This magic, right? There are traditions that celebrate this magic. So he taught me a lot about pushing, and since then he's taught me an awful lot about lots of other things. But that urge to push is a powerful thing to understand. So I want to talk about it a little bit more. And the best way to talk about it is by talking about the urge to poop, because we all know what that experience is like. And just to imagine, the urge to poop that you have when you're sitting on the potty, you're reading your paper, and, it's going to happen eventually. And then there's the urge to poop that happens when you are in a public place, you have no idea where the bathroom is, and you need to go now, right? There's a huge range that all encompasses the urge to poop. And the urge to push is similar to that. Sometimes it's pretty chill, it's not that strong. And other times it's the train coming through, right? So, and that can change woman to woman. It can change labor to labor. It can change contraction to contraction. So it's really good to know that. But it is good to know that that's going to happen, that it's not just an I want to, it's a, oh, here it is, right? My body is going to push this baby out, whether I do anything or not. And really, if we don't push along with our poop, our body's going to push it out eventually. But sometimes, we give it a little bit of help. We push, we hold our breath, we push a little bit. Sometimes we don't have to hold our breath. We just contract our muscles. And so we already know how to do that. But just imagine for a moment, you're sitting on the potty, you're feeling the urge to push, and somebody is sitting there looking at you going, 10, 9, 8, 7. You know what I want to do? Be like, get the hell out of here, right? First of all, I can't poop when you're here. And second of all, why are you telling me when to push? I can feel when to push. You can't feel when I should push. So the reason that we see mamas on their backs with someone yelling 10, 9, 8 in their faces is because of that 85% epidural rate that forces moms on their back. And that's coached pushing. And coached pushing is for a mama who cannot feel what's happening in her body. It's part of why you ideally do not want to have an epidural. When you can feel when you need to push. And we're going to go over the top-down breath in just a few minutes. But whether you use the top-down breath or whether you hold your breath and push, if it's mom-directed pushing, it's going to be way more efficient than anybody else telling you what to do. And when you trust the people around you and they are trusting and honoring your path, your method, what you're feeling, you're going to feel much more comfortable than some, person you don't trust yelling orders at you. So I think that's important. But one thing to think about in all of this is talking to your caregiver, right? Have you asked your caregiver what your options are for birthing? If you're going to be at home, your midwife is going to let you do whatever feels right to you. And you can ask, do you have a birth stool? You can contemplate having a birth tub. I know I had a birth tub for my second 2 babies because I hadn't really wanted to get out of the tub with my first one. The only reason I did is because the tub was so shallow. It was just a normal bathtub. But a birth tub, you can be upright. It's much deeper. You can move around really easily. Your partner can be in there with you. It's a fabulous way to give birth and not have to really think about what position you're in because you're floating. Gravity is, not a force that you're having to contend with in the same kind of way as you do on land. So you can have an unencumbered pelvis very easily. I encourage you to talk to your caregiver about what positions are going to be available to you. And the reason I say that is because going back to my best friend who saw me birth on my hands and knees, she was in her final appointments with her caregiver when she asked about birthing on her hands and knees. And her caregiver said, oh no, whether you have an epidural or not, I'm going to have you in a propped up position on your back. And she said the reason for that is that she would have a bad back if she let her people choose to be wherever they wanted to be. She needed to be able to be in a good position herself to deliver. And so it's good to know that. My best friend chose not to change caregivers at that point, but she really wished she had asked earlier so that she knew. And she had a really great birth experience all the way up until she had to be on her back to push. And at that point, it just felt unnatural to her. Here she had gone through her entire labor, being able to move around and be in whatever position felt right. And now at the very end, as she's getting ready to push this baby out, she has to lay on her back. And going back to the urge to poop, how often have you felt the urge to poop and you lay down in your bed, no less? It just feels wrong. So our bodies are used to pushing in a certain position, and being able to honor that can be really helpful.